Hello, 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 and welcome back to Yesterday's Tea. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Liz.
And today we are going to deep dive in the financial devastation of France, on top of a little bit of other things. And before we do that, we'd love to give a big shout out to Green Health, the supplier of our herbal brew.
Cheers.
And so the reason why we were delayed last week is Liz spent a lovely week at the Oregon Country Fair.
I did. It was a much needed break from the trials and tribulations of the world.
Oh, it has been so bad.
So much.
And I ended up knocking out 2 finals while they were gone, as well as compiled amazing episodes. I think I'm at least 4, maybe 5 episodes ahead.
I think you are too.
Yeah.
I would also like to give a big shout out to all the Oregon firefighters out there on the front lines right now, and all of the firefighters who have come in from other states and even the rest of the world to come help battle our blazes.
We appreciate you.
Yeah, in spite of everything, we love you guys. Thank you for being out there and putting your lives on the line. So, sorry, I know we didn't rehearse that. It just occurred to me. I was thinking about
Yeah.
So anyway,
comes home tomorrow. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Well, maybe tomorrow. Travel time. It might put him at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning getting home. So I
get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he's gonna turn right around and go right back out. Yeah.
It looks like it.
Yeah.
It looks like it.
So shout out to all of the wildland firefighters out there fighting fires, not only in Oregon, but all around the world right now. Thank you so much for all you do, helping to save our lives and our homes and the forests and land that we love.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess, it's all me, right?
Yeah.
So, my eyes are just not what they used to be. On a geopolitical front, what we've got is Spain throwing a total temper tantrum so badly that France has to team up with its mortal enemy, England.
Peak European drama at the point.
So much. But before we get into the War of the Quadruple Alliance and a few years before the Selomir conspiracy, the economy was in ruins.
Devastation.
Absolute devastation. And King Louis XIV,
great-great-grandfather,
right, left France with 2.4 billion livres in debt, essentially totally bankrupt, deeply in debt. And interest payments had, at that point, outpaced the kingdom's top revenue. Tax revenue.
Yeah.
So 2.4 billion livre in modern USD is estimated to be about $20.2 billion. But it could be upwards of $200 billion based on the metal's purity. Also, as I think we did cover in the last episode.
In one of the 14th season, or part of the season.
No, and I think we also covered it, I think I briefly talked about this in our last episode even. It's really hard to do the math between how much debt they had and then turn it into modern currency.
The conversion doesn't exist either.
The conversion doesn't exist. And as we're going to see, the colonies play a role in this that is murky at best. And it also messes with that conversion numbers.
Yeah.
So, under Philippe, I'm so sorry. Under Philippe, the government would first attempt an aggressive traditional method to manage the debt and then radically transform the economy so drastically, and that is what we're going to spill the tea on. This went so badly. So, in our last episode, there was some uncertainty due to some scripting issues regarding King Louis XIV's will and how Duke Philippe d'Orléans had it legally annulled. The will was finalized in August of 1715. It restricted Philippe's power by putting him on a council.
Yep.
Right? To act as regency for the boy king Louis XV. Two of the members of Louis XIV's sons were sons of his, the Duke of Maine, who we met during the Celomere conspiracy, and his brother, the Duke of Toulouse. When he too was, both of them were stripped of their title Prince of the Blood, and therefore rendered powerless.
All of 14's children technically were stripped of Prince of the Blood or Princess title that was bestowed upon them.
Right. So they did remain at court, but they lost all influence within it.
Yep. So on September 1st, when 14 dies, it is said before the king even took his last breath, Philippe was already negotiating with Parliament to annul the will.
Palace scandal, imagine that.
Yeah, right?
This is like the story of how kings die. There's always some minister in the shadows, like, seizing power. Before it's even done. And this is Philippe. Philippe.
Yep, because we have a Philippe in Spain that we're about to talk to, so we have to be very distinct on this.
Yes, this is Philippe of France.
Yes.
Regent.
So, while he was negotiating with members of Parliament, he was leveraging their desire to regain the right of remonstrance, which was... Remonstrance. Yeah. Which was their ability to challenge any royal edict before they passed it. 14 had actually made them pass all edicts before they were allowed to question him. And at that point, it was already law, so why are you questioning my law?
Yeah, why do you question the king?
Yeah. So, they wanted that power back. Philippe was promising that power back if they would allow him to seize power over the regency completely.
Right, become an absolute ruler.
Yep. So, Philippe convened a Lit de Justice, which was where the formal sovereign, which means the king had to be present, would decide over a session of the French Parliament where the king would personally take control entirely, and then he would force the Parliament to register any edict. So that meant that the king must be present. Now, we're talking about a child. This kid has no authority at this point to even understand what's going on in the world around him.
Like, not at all.
Not at all. So on September 12th, they take the poor child, he's 5 at this point, and carry him into the grand chamber of the Palais de Justice, where the official regent Philippe exercised his power and had the will annulled. And that returned the power to the Parliament, which will eventually lead to the French Revolution, as well as protesting royal tax laws and reforms that we will find as the financial deadlock that is a problem for everything.
So, after Philippe seizes power, he pretty much ignores the king entirely. And he decides to establish a stupid, revolutionary, experimental government type, like, right away. And he makes it up of nobles. And remember, one of the things that we applauded about Louis XIV was that he took power out of the hands of noble families. He left them their titles and their lands.
Right.
But
they were also all at court scrounging for his scraps.
And they didn't actually have any real power in that they weren't actually running the things that their families had traditionally run.
Yeah.
What Philippe has promised is that he's going to give them their power back.
Yeah.
Right? And so instead of having experts actually running the country, which to his credit, Louis did have actual experts
These
running
were
the mechanisms.
These were...
I mean, terribly, because he was in debt anyway.
Yeah.
But to his credit, he tried.
Yeah.
So he creates on October 1st, 1715, and forgive me, this word has tripped me up all week, Palisynodi.
You got it!
Woohoo! No, seriously, that is not staged. was a series of specialized councils, each focusing on specific functions of the state, such as foreign affairs, domestic policy, and finance. I gotta tell you, this is the kind of way a fantasy writer would set a kingdom up in order to create conflict for the purpose of the narrative. This is like if I was creating, well, I am, but this is how you do it. Right. That's how it's done.
Yeah.
Okay. That purpose was to restore power to those high-ranking nobles and reverse the promotion of ministers, which had the actual mechanisms of power in terms of the levers of government. They weren't considered nobility. They didn't have a bunch of the privileges, but they were effectively running the country, and they were paid well. They were the bureaucracy, and they were paid well, and they had garnered respect because at the local level, many of them were quite successful, and they were the experts
of their field.
Of their field, of their time. 1700s. Yeah. Be gentle. Okay. There we go. The council was intended to promote discussion and collaboration, but of course it just ended up with constant bickering, disagreement, power plays. These people have been pitted against each other under Louis XIV's court for a long time. So now that there is power to get, they're all trying to grab as much of it as possible.
Yep.
It turns out it was completely ineffective in actually running a government, and it was completely dismantled by 1718 due to its total failure. Absolute abject failure.
It ate itself from the inside. Nothing got done.
Yep.
So, as a effect from the financial section of the Polysynody, they formed the Chamber de Justice and launched the Visa in 1715.
Oh, bad idea on top of a bad idea.
Yup. So the Visa is a mandatory audit that was to address the nation's debt. Not necessarily a bad idea, just being kind of thought out. Like, hey, let's audit the nation and see what's going on. This is how we find out what we actually owe.
Right.
Like, from an accountant perspective, that's my job. So, yeah, this makes a lot of sense at first.
Sort of. Because the execution
is 1700 France. This is not 2026 America. So...
For all of our
failures.
Right, okay, moving forward.
So what they did was call all their creditors to come in with their IOUs, their banknotes, what was basically negotiated contractual between the crown and these
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
Figure out what's going on.
Yep. So the goal was to expose high interest rates and excessive profiteering. Are you scamming the government and making extra money off of us? Of course there was. So, the Chamber of Justice oversaw all these claims, oversaw the reviews, and so it ended up essentially becoming a shakedown that canceled all financial debt that the crown owed pretty much everyone.
Right, because they went very quickly from, we're going to look at the books and figure out what we owe, to figuring out that they were absolutely bankrupt, even cutting out the corruption. They were still totally and completely bankrupt. And so then it gets really bad.
So the government ends up claiming that all of their debts are arbitrary to most people.
This is all just arbitrary.
So most people find out that their IOUs and banknotes are either completely worthless or worth fractions of what their original claim was. Eventually,
and these are merchants.
Yeah, these are merchants.
These
are elite merchants too. These are the guys that like.
This is the merchant business class that has been running Louis XIV's government effectively.
Yeah.
And yes, are they all skimming?
Of course. Everybody's skimming.
Everybody was skimming.
Still are.
But quite a bit of that money was in fact owed. The government was deeply in debt.
Right.
Anyway, moving on.
So So after everyone found out their IOUs were worth fractions, by mid-1716, the audit had reached its breaking point. The public was outraged. They didn't want to deal with this visa anymore. Cancel the audit. So this aggressive tactic no longer also aligned with the economy. Just like what Liz said, they realized they were so in debt, their economy was crashing around them.
And now the people were aware of it too because, well, we're about to get into that, but they're being robbed now.
Yeah.
The audit has turned into a robbery.
Yeah, so this created the perfect storm for John Law. And I cannot stand this man. When I look at economics and philosophy, my blood boils at the thought of this man. I blame his system and his economics for pretty much the foundation of capitalism, the foundation of stock exchange, and also it is the base for the modern petrodollar.
It is also the basis for speculative futures markets.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, a particularly dangerous feature of the kind of vulture capitalism that this guy brings to the world.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So his economic theory, I also blame for many of the modern crises that we have faced financially since 1723, 1716, really, when this
for the last
jerk gets power.
300 years.
Yeah.
This guy's model has been messing with the world, and we're going to show you how. We're not even going to have to tell you how it's happening all over again.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be really obvious from the story. So we're just going to let history speak for itself here.
Yep. And so now that I've truly so I'm going to try to remain neutral, but bear in mind, I don't, and I probably hate this man as much as the mobs did that ran him out of Paris in 1723, and without doubt, I would have probably been a part of the mob that attacked his carriages. This man
I'm not so minded myself. I'm not saying I wouldn't have aided and abetted the operation along the way, though.
I would have.
Operations require people at many levels.
Right. So now that I've expressed my disdain for this man, we introduced to you the economist and philosopher with educated titles that, in my opinion, he does not deserve. The horrible and foul human being, John Law, and what we know in history today as the Mississippi Bubble Crisis.
Which we're not going to really get into as much as we had thought.
Yeah, that will be actually in the next episode.
That's going to be in the next episode.
A little bit more. We kind of touched on the Louisiana dream.
This was so important to the story, and there's so much here that we actually, what we thought was going to be one episode,
had to cut in half.
We cut in half, and it's still going to be pretty meaty.
Yeah.
Woohoo! So let's get into it. John Law. He's born in Edinburgh, Scotland, April 21st, 1671. And this just surprising me not at all, he's born into a family of goldsmiths and bankers.
Yep.
Which would lend to his knowledge of finance, credit, and the, overall mechanisms, of lending. So he attends high school, and he's expelled.
He excels.
Oh, I'm sorry. He excels.
He excels.
I'm sorry. Really, this lighting and this...
We also use 12 point instead of bumping it up to like 14 or 15, the 16 like we normally do.
Thanks.
Hey, even I need the bigger font.
Yeah, and this lighting is just not...
God-awful.
Oh, it is not great. Okay, moving on. He excels in mathematics, and he studies Latin. But then he chooses not to go to college.
Of course.
When he's 14, he joined the family business and gained experience in being a banker under his father's guidance. As a young man, his father died in
1688. John would have been about 17 when his father passed away.
Yeah. And then John inherits a small estate, but he quickly accumulates so much debt because he immediately takes this as an opportunity to start living the high life. He throws lavish parties, and he is a gambler.
Loves to gamble.
He loves to gamble. Basically, this guy is a conman gambler from the word go. He's unrepentant. And
he's so foul about his gambling addiction.
Yeah.
It's an addiction for him.
So what he winds up doing is he uses his knowledge of statistics and probability to rig the games, right?
Yep.
In his favor as the dealer. So he knows that the house always wins, and under his rigged games, the house always wins.
Yep.
And often he would do these things in coffee lounges and places where men of high society would gather to gamble in order to gain access to high society. And by 21, he had squandered his inheritance, and so to resolve the debt, he sold the debt to his mother.
Oh, Mommy dearest!
His mummy had to buy his debt.
Are you my mommy?
Jane Campbell is considered a sensible woman. She managed her finances well and successfully kept the estate within the family, even though her son was a financial wreck.
Yes. Yeah. So during this time, like after his mom purchased his debt, and he was living under her roof again, he continued to study the gambling techniques of statistics and probability and started building on his knowledge of finance that laid the foundation to what we know as the economic theory of the system. And that's actually its name, is the system.
So creepy. This is such a strangely creepy time.
Right. So, before we get into the system, 1694 rolls around, and John Law kills a man by the name of Edward Bow Wilson. They say it was over a love interest, but it is also speculated that, of course, Law owed Wilson a debt. So the love interest, her name was Elizabeth Valliere, and she was actually the mistress of Bow. John was a popular, dashing man. I actually looked up a photo of him or a painting of him, and if you want to, be non-biased for the 1700s, actually, yeah, he wasn't a bad-looking gentleman.
He was a little debonair. He wasn't, to my liking, a standardly attractive man, but he certainly carried himself with this air of confidence. He was very debonair, as near as I could tell.
His paintings obviously were probably meant to make him look a little bit better than he actually did in real life, because honestly, all those paintings did.
Yeah, they're glamour shots of the 1700s, right?
But honestly, for the time period, yeah, he wasn't a bad-looking dude.
And he has a reputation in his time as being a womanizer, a dandy.
Uh-huh. So on April 9th, Bow and Law meet at Bloomsbury Square for their duel. Dueling's outlawed in 1694, England, by the way. They're in London.
They're in London?
Yeah, they are in London. So, in order to be more honorable, they decide to draw swords instead of pistols. Fair, actually, because they were trying to be men of nobility, even though Law was not. So Law the fight was brief, and Law ran Wilson through, killing him immediately. He was arrested, and in the trial, he was sentenced to death. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
If only this was the end of the story. And so he finds himself in the notorious Newgate prison. Now, this is supposed to be one of the top security prisons.
We're going to cover Newgate Prison when we cover England at some point.
Oh, yeah.
It's its own story.
It is its own story. So his mom was fighting for an appeal, And somehow in transport from trial to prison, he escapes. How? Who knows?
It's the 1700s. Security might have been good, but things did happen back then.
Things happened. They actually speculated it was a bribe as well, that the mom
paid a guard to look away and
let him go.
It's possible. All these things are possible. His mom did already have a history of bailing him out.
Yeah. So. And she was also already fighting to appeal the verdict, saying that it was not premeditated murder.
Right.
I mean, you challenge somebody to a duel, you set a date, that's premeditated, because you're planning on killing them.
Well, is he the one who challenged?
Actually, history doesn't say who challenged.
Interesting.
Yeah, history does not actually note who challenged who.
Because if the other guy challenged, then it couldn't have been premeditated.
I mean, you still agree to the duel. That's still premeditation, in my opinion.
No. And he still chose to go right at him. Like, that was not a gentlemanly way to fight. He just skewered him.
Yeah.
Pretty immediately, as I understand it.
Apparently, according to, it was like a 5-minute, draw your sword, take your steps, and Law just plunged. There was no honor to it, from what history describes it as.
Oof.
Yeah. Anyways, the jerkface ends up fleeing to the European continent, where he would travel and continue his studies on various banking systems that would lead to the foundation of the system.
So, to sum up, this guy's a gambling dandy, a womanizer, a murderer, and a fugitive. But he winds up traveling Europe under the winnings from his rigged games.
Yeah. Dude is a flippin' nightmare.
As we mentioned, he spends the time studying the different economies of Paris, Amsterdam, and Venice, and a few other places, but those specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And on his journeys, he attends events discussing the latest economic theories, whose goal is to explain the precious metal shortage and how actually to fix debts. His personal goal was to understand the medium of exchange, and that's when he discovers that although the gold and silver are most commonly assigned forms of currency, anything could serve as currency as long as the public placed their trust in the value of the item being traded for their needs.
Yep.
Anything. This is important. So, due to the financial availability of gold and silver, this would eventually cause economic stagnation because there's simply not enough to go around. And while he's in the Netherlands, he gets fascinated by how the Bank of Amsterdam uses credit to move away from reliance on precious metals, and how this credit system, that becomes the blueprint for the system. So he actually, now I gotta tell you, this channel would not be this channel if we did not deep dive Dutch economics at some point, because there are lessons to be learned.
I can't wait to tear apart the Dutch economy.
Oh my goodness, it's and I'm sure some of you already know parts of that story, because that is some drama.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so we'll spill the tea on that on another time.
In another episode. So ultimately, this theory he perfected was regarding currency or money as not inherently wealth in the form of a precious metal, but merely as a medium of exchange to facilitate the movement of goods. So this could take the form of goods for goods, like apple for apple, orange for apple type thing. The shells that we find in the North American culture, the stones and gems that we find of the South American cultures.
Right, in fact, gemstones were already a form of currency in
Mesopotamia.
Well, no, in France at the time.
Yeah, right. France at the time.
Dowries were filled with gifts of jewels regularly because jewels were already a form of currency. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then we also can have it in the form of paper. Our little paper dollar. Yay. So as long as there was general belief that the trade was fair and it was accepted by both parties, it was good currency. Right? So John believed that the economy's prosperity was tied to the circulation of money, not to the hoarding of precious metals. He argued that a paper currency could actually, based on a credit system, would stimulate the economy. Are you seeing why this man is a problem to all problems in the economic system we're facing? Believing that increasing the money supply through government-issued banknotes, the government could boost trade, employment, revitalize the economy, and even resolve its massive debt problem. On paper, it actually sounds pretty decent.
Yikes. Okay. Told you the story speaks for itself.
Right?
So I'm sure you're wondering how this madman becomes friends with Philippe, Regent of France.
Right.
And truthfully, that actually isn't exactly known. Because obviously we are not there. And there was no documentation on who was showing up to which coffee house. First of all, that just isn't documented regularly.
Right. There was no guest list.
But this guy is already, he knows to fleece the rich. So good on him there.
Yeah.
And so they wind up moving in the same circles, and eventually they come into each other's orbit. We know that Philippe called his buddies ruse, and while John Law definitely fit his type, what made him different from the other ruse was largely that he just wasn't nobility. So he was he was in the circle, but he wasn't in the circle. Yeah. Royal cliques being as they are.
John definitely deserved the punishment of a ruse, though.
Oh, absolutely. This guy is just too much. Let's see. Yeah, I think that was it. They come into orbit through the coffee shop, salons.
Yep. Law was a commoner, and because Law knows how to gamble, he got his way. So, Law spent his years refining his theory, studying pamphlets, writing his proposals. He worked really hard on this. He had actually pitched his proposals to other monarchs, and he'd been rejected.
I'll give John Law credit for only one thing over the system we have today. Today, the people know perfectly good and well when they're doing something that will harm the people for the sake of short-term economic gain.
Right.
Law at least believed in his system wholeheartedly. He did go around pitching it to absolutely everybody. He wanted to test his economic theory at the national level.
Right. You're not wrong. So, he gained access to the French aristocracy through the coffee houses, and by the time he actually got Philippe's attention, the government was scrambling because of the Policinati.
Yeah.
And also the first audit, the visa was also bombing at this point when Law and Philippe actually get to know each other. So John presents his idea with a whole bunch of scientific, mathematical jargon. Sounding smart, lended to his credibility of being smart, and it also made the contemporary elites around him pretending they knew what he was talking about. This is great, yes, I love your idea. They couldn't argue with him because they had no idea what the Philippe, he was actually
He
spooey.
used the language of science and mathematics, and he did excel in mathematics. He was a financial whiz. This is really quite true.
Yeah.
So, but he bedazzled them using language they couldn't really actually understand, but sounded very scientific. And he was legitimately more educated than many of them were. Like, these nobles were not educated. Their only job for the last 70 years was to be noble and preen.
Yeah.
Right? So, he had actually been rejected by Philippe before, after the death of Louis XIV, but then seeing the Chambre de Justice failure became ever more apparent. Desperation was growing. They had to make amendments. So they made amendments to the proposal in May of 1716. Law had originally proposed a public bank, but the Polisynode... I told you. Polisynode, the Council of Finance, was a conservative and suspicious body. It was tribal. It was part of that radical innovation, and they had just gotten power back. They don't want to give it back, right? They saw Law's system as basically a threat to their oversight, and so the idea of a public bank is pretty immediately out. Now, again, initially the Regency just hadn't even been interested in this idea. Like, at all. It wasn't interested in modernization. It was still hooked on the idea that it could bull its way through the problem based on the old system. It really did. People didn't know any other way.
Right.
It wanted to focus solely on addressing the debt. And since Law's brand new economic theory hadn't been proven, the government didn't really want to put the economy of the entire culture in the hands of a known gambler.
Oh, also, just something that they haven't even been tested on a global scale yet.
Yeah. So the public bank proposal would require extensive state-backed financial support while navigating the transfer of royal power. It didn't make sense to invest. Like, the people who needed to invest in this were like,
we're not going to. We're not giving up our golden medals.
Right. The Regency and Law agreed to make the experimental system private as a last resort. So they established the Banque Générale in mid-May of 1716. It coexisted with the Visa and the Chambre de Justice auditing. It was managing a different part of the economy. The Chambre de Justice was a judicial system to clean up financial fraud. Ha ha.
Right.
And John Law's system was the future of the economy, ushering a new era for France. Because Banque Générale was a private entity in need of capital, it had to become publicly owned. Again, the very people they needed to finance it were like, we're not putting our faith in this. That was the whole problem, is it had no faith of the investment market.
This is where we see kind of the birth of the stock exchange.
Yeah, this is the creation of the modern stock market.
I'm about to throw some jargon at you. Be prepared. This is explaining...
Economic jargon.
Yeah, economic jargon.
Okay. I think you did a good job with this.
Yes. So, as a private company is transitioning into the public market, it needs to gain capital, just like what Liz said. So, in order to gain capital, it issues a specific number of shares. Just whatever random number it wants to divide its company into. And then it sets the initial share price. And this remains true in today's stock exchange and market today. So the initial capital is raised through an IPO, which is the initial public offering. So for France and the Banque Générale, it set 1,200 shares for 5,000 livres. It was a steal. You can get 1,200 of that company, which I think is like 1.2% of the company.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And shareholders were permitted to pay for these shares by also using their government banknotes, include at like their IOUs that the government
those
the Visa,
totally worthless IOUs
Visas,
were now being used to buy shares in the bank.
On top of issuing it with your precious metals and gold. So you had to pay half the shares with gold and silver, and then half the shares you could pay with your notes. So, on top of that, if you use the government bank IOUs, you'd get half the price. So you'd get double for that worthless.
So the
IOU.
government is buying up its own pretend debt, and it's using shares
to a bank
to a bank to do this.
Yep. So
gotta give it credit for clever.
I know, right? So at 1,200 shares at 5,000 livre, that brought in immediately roughly 6 million livre to the bank.
I mean, they're in debt by billions, but still, this is automatic. Whoosh.
Yep. So how did the $5,000 5,000 livre get set for that price?
Faith?
Exactly. So the investors believed in the company.
But why?
But why? Well, we're about to get to that. That's got something to do with an American dream. And so, with the belief in the company, the assets would also grow with potential. And all future buyers could decide, based on belief, that the company has better value or has become more valuable based on observation, would increase the price it's paid for these shares.
Which is still how we do speculative markets today.
And how we do the stock exchange today entirely.
It's entirely this.
Yeah.
Okay,
so,
moving on. Okay, so the government had issued a massive number of these IOUs during the audit of 1715. As a substitute for their lack of revenue, right? And because the Crown lacked the funds to support those IOUs, most of the public, basically, as we covered, they'd already lost their faith in them. They had no value, and they knew that, right?
Right.
So
they
that
restored faith by giving them the value to pay
back, right? They kind of, they don't buy in right away. It's true. So this threatens to paralyze the economy again. By allowing the shareholders and investors to buy in using IOUs, it created an incentive for the elites to participate in the bank and then to accept that at a much higher value than they were actually worth. This effectively eliminated the balance sheet.
Yep.
Removed millions in debt, and then replaced gold with banknotes, paper banknotes, transferring junk paper into equity that functioned as the new financial institution. So this is the moment when gold and precious metals are turned into paper on paper.
Okay. To the end of the economy. Anyways, so
moving on. Actually, the problem is short-term brilliance.
I know.
And there's a reason we continue to use it, because it has this weird short-term brilliance. We're going to cover it. Getting there.
So John Law started issuing these banknotes sometime around 1716, and he was backing them, like I said, half with gold and silver, the other half with the bonds and the IOUs. However, this wasn't actually working out the way they wanted, so they had to order course force, is what they call it, and they mandated the paper money to be strictly used over any and all transactions over 100 livre. which is a loaf of bread at the time. Furthermore, no individual could possess more money, more gold than 500 livres in gold or silver, and all gold was banned from any payment exceeding 100 livres. Again, anything over a loaf of bread, you couldn't pay with a livre.
So the law gets changed because people didn't, again, people knew better. While this system is being implemented, they're still out on the streets, and what has value to them is gold and silver.
Yeah.
So they were still using it.
Yeah. So this had effectively forced the public to accept the paper's value, and it was providing the manipulation that they needed to drive the financial maneuver away. However, the money still needed value. They needed something to actually believe in.
Backed by something in the minds of the people, if nothing else.
Yep.
Oh, and it turns out it does need more than that.
Yep.
So while Law printed propaganda, he definitely, remember we said earlier he had studied pamphlets, now he knows how to use them.
Yep.
And he's depicting these gold-filled mountains. He also sends soldiers to strip the population of their heirlooms and their personal treasures. This is absolutely tragic. This is a real robbery. This is an armed robbery at this point.
Yep.
So, John Law would issue government-backed reports of fabricated propaganda about the territory's profitability. So he would use his propaganda to say, oh, that this region of people over here, they're hoarding their wealth, right? Yep. And he'd get people to believe this in the first place. Anyone who publicly criticized that narrative,
yep.
or questioned the system's stability overall was silenced, and the crackdown just created a more fearful and skeptical environment. Yep. So it was actually backfiring on itself kind of right away. The more the public was silenced, surprise, surprise, the more they kind of knew something was not right with this new system, right? And I remember watching movies when I was a kid that were set in this period of history, and this conversation would be in the background. Paper money was largely criticized by common people at the time. Everybody knew it was a bad idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. That wasn't radical. So the state winds up offering a reward of 3,000 livres to anyone who informed on a neighbor for hoarding anything of possible value. Oh!
Yeah.
Man, we're so good. Neighbors turned on neighbors, informing on those hiding gold from the state, right? Then the police forces were sent in to seize the valuables for the crown. Terrified of any appearance of wealth, the public resorted to burying their heirlooms and treasures in secret. Also, we're going to talk later about how style of dress said a lot about who you were in French society, and how quite a bit of it becomes performative. This is part of how, because the people start dressing and looking like paupers. They take on this, I don't know, we didn't really cover it here, but they take on this piety.
Right,
and it all becomes very Catholic, too, and so you're supposed to be eschewing your wealth. A lot of this is happening with a serious religious element in the undertone.
Yeah.
And so some people actually legit wind up giving their treasures to the state. Others are trying to hide them from the state.
Right.
And everybody's pretending to be a papa, whether they are or not.
Yes. So, just like John Law spilling a lot of economic and mathematical jargon, we also just spilled a lot of mathematical and economic jargon at you as well.
Yeah, that's okay.
So,
I think we did a good job.
I think we did too, but just in case we got a little confusing, the core idea of the system was to increase the money supply with a paper currency. That paper currency would stimulate trade across the board, thus raising the market prices and eliminating debt.
And remember, we covered this a little bit too in laissez-faire economics.
This is the base of laissez-faire.
Well, yeah, because the velocity of cash turns out to be more important than the cash asset. What keeps an economy going is trade.
Right. Absolutely. So this inflation would reduce the value of debt, making it easier to manage and repay. John Law used the illusion of the Louisiana Territory in the American colonies,
purchased under Louis XIV.
14th, as an illusion that it was very prosperous.
Right, this vast tract of land with unknown levels of wealth. Yeah. And it's easy to sell to everybody, actually. From the nobility to the common person, the Louisiana Purchase looked like a straight shot of cash.
It was a gold mine.
It was a gold mine.
Or at least sold as a gold mine. So, like I said, if you owed someone 100 livres, the inflation had drove the prices so high that 100 livres was worth a single loaf of bread.
Right.
So that effectively eliminated the debt, would simply eliminate your debt by handing over a loaf of bread for 100 livres. The overprinting of paper currency made the gold worthless. And that eliminated all the debt that the monarchy had incurred over centuries.
At least on paper.
At least on paper.
So John Law viewed himself as a scientist applying a formula to a broken system. Give him a little bit of credit.
I tried.
He genuinely did believe in his system. He believed he was applying the scientific method to economics. And in this weird short-term way, his idea appeared to be working. The theory appears at first to be proving itself. And so it's easy to see how, without knowing what we know about the economy today,
right?
And now we do it on purpose, right? But at least these guys didn't have the benefit of already knowing that what they were doing was a bad idea.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say that. We have no excuses. The idea of the system was that increasing the money supply with paper currency would stimulate trade, right? We covered that.
Yeah.
Raising market prices. The inflation would reduce the value of the debt, making it easier to manage and repay. John Law used the illusion of colonial wealth to persuade the public that the paper notes had actual value, that they were backed by, like the timber and the furs and
the fur trade, the illusion of gold being in the mountains.
Right. So someone owed you 100 livres, the inflation.
It's supposed to be down here somewhere.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought so.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out where the hell you were supposed to be, too.
I think Mississippi bubble.
Yeah.
While the Mississippi bubble is not a direct cause of today's crises, we basically live in the world that he built on that foundation, where money is the tool for trust, and we're still learning how to manage that trust, and the risks he unleashed today. So there's this massive psychological shift, and again, the public hadn't bought it originally, so they needed to fully place their faith in the government-issued paper banknotes under John Law's regulation. And so on April 10th, 1717, a royal decree makes those banknotes legal tender for paying taxes. Ta-da! Now this system isn't just based on his bank and his theory. Now it has the full backing and the weight of the state of France.
Not quite the full rate, but close to the full weight.
Close. Because you can now pay taxes in it.
Yep.
And that gives it value, or the idea of credence in any way.
Yeah.
But John Law needed something to justify those rising stock prices for the bank shares, which kept going up and up. And so the number of notes that the government was issuing. Before we continue, does anyone recognize this concept as our petrodollar? So this was before black gold, but Across the ocean lay the New World, where Louis XIV had claimed the Louisiana Territory during 1862 expedition that navigated the Mississippi River. We would love to explore
the bayou.
The swamps of the bayou that hide the history of Louisiana Territory. Early American history should be covered extensively and will be at some point. There's so much to get to.
That's my family origins right here in America. I
want to cover the Papal States. Okay. Anyways. Lots to go. We're only just getting started. Stretching from Quebec, Canada, to the Gulf of Mexico, and from the Appalachians to the Rockies. So, larger than the state of Louisiana.
It was massive. 1,200,000 square mile territory.
And it was
pure wilderness.
Paradise, pure wilderness. Well, no.
It was painted as paradise.
It was painted as paradise and pure wilderness, to say nothing of the people who actually lived there.
We'll get to that in the next episode.
But it was exactly what John Law needed to push the illusion, right? It looks like endless timber. It looks like the infusion from the fur trade and literally there'd be gold in Nar Hills. It was largely sold that the United States, North America, was filled with mountains that had gold everywhere. And to their credit, we do have quite a few.
Right.
There is gold.
Yep.
No. Also, most importantly, this is what the illusion hinges on. Nobody can prove him wrong
because communication took so long to get overseas,
and they legitimately were finding. I mean, the colonies weren't profitable the way they were supposed to be.
Yeah.
But there is no question that the Louisiana Purchase physically contained the resources that they were seeking.
Right.
To some extent. And so this winds up sort of working, and nobody can prove them wrong. The public believes they're buying into the colonies, right? And so they think that by buying into the colonies, they are investing in French culture and the expansion, the glory of France. All of this, by the way, tied into the church.
Yep.
And then the economic outputs from the territory was negligible compared to the massive stock speculation. So it turns out that colony life was very hard. It's very difficult to sustain a colony. They cost, in the short term, far more than they will turn out for you in the long term.
Right.
Far, far more. And so rather than being some economic infusion of actual resources, they're kind of this drain. Right. Now, as much as...
No, that's me.
Nope. Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Haha.
Now, a government cannot build a functioning economy and society based on the threat of police action. Raiding anyone at any time, based solely on the suspicion that you may be hiding grandma's ring and a loaf of bread, destroyed the trust of the people on top of the colony. So remember how this paper had only value because they believed in it? Well, not anymore. People had started losing faith again in the paper because Louisiana actually stopped its returns. There was no coming back on the territory. It was not producing what John Law promised.
Right. And there were a bunch of reasons for that.
Yep. So John Law had desperately tried to save his bank and erase the monarchy's debt at the cost of every citizen's life savings by gaslighting and manipulating a nation. This is why I hate the man so much. Not just because his economic theory actually is still in existence today and still hurting people, but he had legally robbed a nation blind.
Right. No army required.
No army required.
France was bankrupt before he started this, so let's just be clear about that, but he definitely made it worse.
So, following the refusal of these edicts, the bank refused to pay out on any public demand for a trade-off. Hey, I want livre, I want my gold and silver back for these banknotes. Refused. Nope. And because of this refusal, the public grew more hostile. And as much as I hate John Law, This is where, if you want to rob a nation, you gamble in its stock market, man. He didn't need the army to bring France to his knees. All he needed is a little bit of paper and false hope.
Thank you. Yeah. So, on December
10th, 1718.
Thank you. The Banque Générale was renamed Banque Royale, and it was nationalized, meaning that Law's economic experiment had the full backing of the French government, which wanted to regulate and control the system, giving it the illusion of stability and the crown's self-interest in restoring wealth too. So it's true that John Law has self-interest in this, but more importantly, the crown also really
realized
needed
it
this.
was working.
Well, no, they really needed the illusion to be true. If it wasn't true, then everything that they had also gambled on letting this system run at all was an absolute. They couldn't let that happen. It would destroy France, right?
Yeah.
So they basically started printing notes at like an unprecedented rate.
Oh, even higher value.
Just, it's basically mass printing government banknotes in order to create quick cash in the economy as fast as possible.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And unlike the occasional, kickback recompense payment in some economies today, like there were the stimulus checks and various economic services during the pandemic,
right?
These had no limit.
Yeah.
No limitations on this. No law limiting
no regulation, nothing.
So it gives this appearance of stability, but there is so much currency in circulation, and there's very few places to invest, actually. So now everybody has money, but nothing to invest it in, because again, those resources aren't actually making their way back to France. I lost my place again.
Started pressing disqualified artificial spikes.
Right, there's so much money in circulation, and there's very few places to invest. So we go back into the Banque Royale, increasing their shares worth again, right? So now they're saying their shares are worth even more.
Because people are putting money back into the company to increase the value.
Right. Buybacks, we call this now. The public needed a place to openly trade their shares, and so they found La Rue, and I may mess this one up again. Yeah, La Rue Quincampoix. And it is, so it's this incredibly cramped, to call it a street would be an overstatement. It's an alley.
It is an alley.
It is an alley. It is muddy. It is not a paved alley.
They describe it as such a small alley that it was barely wide enough for foot traffic.
And barely. We're going to get into that. Yeah. Also, there are homes and businesses on this alley.
Yep.
And that becomes important to the story. So, it becomes the first and perhaps most dangerous Wall Street in history.
Yeah.
All the shouting, the energy, the greed that you would associate with films like
Modern
Boiler
Wall
Room,
Street,
Modern Wall Street, Boiler Rooms. But there's no law governing this at all.
And strip away all the modern technology that you see in Wall Street.
No modern technology. Of course,
course.
These are people arguing and holding paper in their hands in the middle of a muddy street. And it becomes kind of interesting because you have commoners and nobles, since everybody has now been locked into this new paper money system.
Yeah.
Merchants, noble, everybody's locked into this now. And so they're standing in the streets, holding actual people.
So by mid-1719 and early 1720, Rue Quincampoix had been completely packed. It's a claustrophobic hive of speculation. Everyone's increasing the money because they believe it's worth more.
Right.
So shares originally worth 500 ended up skyrocketing to nearly 800,000 livres.
Amazing.
Dude, it was insane how high some of these prices skyrocketed. The crowds were so dense that residents were making fortunes just by renting out a chair, and it is even said that a hunchback had reportedly made a million livres just for renting out his back as a writing desk. And this is actually reportedly a true historical hunchback. Like
that.
The hunchback of Notre Dame might actually just been the hunchback of Rue Quincampoix.
Right. And he becomes a millionaire, right? Which is where we...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this rapid influx of wealth even coined the term millionaire today. Like, millionaire did not exist until Rue Quincampoix. So this environment also brewed chaos, madness, disdain. And so the crime became rampant, and it even became violent as the system began to crack. So by mid-March of 1720, a young wealthy nobleman by the name of Count de Horn had lured a stock jobber. He was one of the dudes that did all the investing. He was kind of like the dude who was in control of negotiations and stuff like that. He lured him into a tavern off the corner of Rue Quincampoix, murdered him, and stole everything he had.
Basically, they're all running around with this paper that they think has enormous value, but they do physically have it in their pockets.
Yeah.
He just murders him and takes his shares.
Yeah. So this actually caused a lot of shock for the fact that this young man was a count. They outraged that outraged the public so badly that they actually had the man broken on the wheel. The irony that we get to call the ruse over and over again. I love it. Illustrates how desperate the pursuit of the paper and wealth had become.
So, again, and this is really important to the story, everyone sees the numbers, and they couldn't believe, because in late 1719, a simple, simple cook earning maybe a few livres per year found themselves worth hundreds or even thousands on paper. So basically, cooks and shoe shiners are suddenly worth so much more.
Yeah.
Because they have all of this paper, and the reason they can have all of this paper is because it is so worthless. That's kind of where the illusion fails.
Mm-hmm.
So once things, people in those positions could only dream of affording, now actually they can't afford them. To be clear, they're buying genuine luxury goods with these products, or at least the better life, right? At least at first. They're buying houses, they're buying furnishings, they're flaunting their new wealth, right? These are the new riche. And to be clear, they do exactly, what we imagine Parisians doing. They are peacocking so hard. Little did they know that their lavish lifestyle was funded entirely by a company with absolutely no revenue whatsoever. There was no
Zero
money coming actually in.
Nothing coming back from Louisiana.
So the mass spendings basically only reinforced the illusion of missing out, convincing the entire nation that it was wealthy, even though the country's most productive assets were entirely stagnant. And for a few short months, everyone was a millionaire, completely and totally unaware that wealth was not real. They legitimately believed that they had all become overnight actual millionaires.
Right. So, Law had promised to fix France's financial crisis, and the Regency had completely different plans. Of course, as soon as they saw the wealth coming in, transferred over to the Bank Royale, and took control of the bank themselves, made it the tax exchange, set the edicts and laws. France was doing good, according to the Regency, even though, at the same time, it was essentially causing even massive more amount of debt that we can't even comprehend today.
Right. And this is the great wild inflation bubble. Like, this is how inflation began.
It is so bad that it affected the American colonies, too. Like...
It's true, and the Louisiana Purchase is...
But it also not only affected France and the American colonies, it affected the global market because it effed with every other nation because of France's economy crashing.
Not China, really, right?
European nation, let me correct. I don't know what trade with China was like. I know they had Ottoman Empire trade, but
it is messing with the world markets, no question.
Yeah. So... we currently find ourselves circa 1719. We find France was dealing with the Selimir conspiracy, which we talked about in the last episode. And we ended the Selimir conspiracy episode with France gearing up to go to war with Spain. And they allied with their enemy, England. And this is where we find the War of the Quadruple Alliance forming. France would take a gamble on their colonies and to fund their war and hope to generate enough profit to conquer their enemy, as well as pay off all their massive debt.
So this land that's producing nothing for them and is the basis of their entire banking system is also now the collateral for expansionism, for war.
Yep. So, for a brief moment, we are going to pause our story on my hero, John Law, and the Mississippi Bubble. I am going to spit on that man's grave one day.
I see. Okay, moving on.
So, we are going to pause our story on his catastrophe and pick up where we left off with the Selimir conspiracy. The unraveling of this plot wasn't just a court scandal of, oh my god, Duke de Maine is trying to seize the Regency back after the annulment. It wasn't just that. This was also affecting the global shift of the European continent. And it actually changed the map to almost what we know Europe as today, with the exception of the Papal States and a few other countries kind of off towards Romania and that region.
Right. Not everything in Europe got settled all at once.
Yet, but we're starting to see what we know
beginning
as
of the
modern
shape
of the
starts
continent.
Taking shape here.
And so... on the geopolitical front, King Philip V of Spain was being influenced by his dearly beloved Cardinal Alberoni. And...
oh my, this is such a scandal.
oh yes. So he was being influenced by Alberoni. I did it again. And to violate the Treaty of Utrecht, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. It was a treaty signed in 1713 by Louis XIV during the War of the Spanish Succession. So the Selimir conspiracy exposed that Prince Selimir, the Spanish ambassador to the French court, was the one who was in charge of payroll and pretty much in charge of plotting Duke of Maine to take his place. When that got exposed, there was a public outcry. The French citizen felt betrayed by their Spanish brother. Right. They were Bourbon monarchs.
This shouldn't have been happening.
They were both Bourbons. Sure, different sides of the family, because you have a Orleans over a de France, which Louis de France is King of France. And then you got d'Orléans, and then now the King of Spain Bourbon family, which I can't actually remember which original house they broke down from the genealogy family tree, but they're technically French too, originally.
And it was thought for so long up until now that it was kind of Spain and France against England.
It was always Spain and France.
It was always Spain and France, and so this is really. I mean, they'd been
hurt.
at odds before. There's a lot of court intrigue between them and between both of them in Rome. And there's a lot of politicking going on. Oh, the Austrian-Hungary.
Much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway. But they had been seen as allies, and this shatters that too.
They were always allies, especially going against the Habsburg Austrian Empire.
The Austro-Roman Empire.
They were always going against each other. And France and Spain were always side by side. For the most part, there's definitely, the War of the Roses. Spain was involved in their own way and whatnot, but yeah. Aside from that, the betrayal hurt the public so deeply that the Cardinal actually placed his bid on the alliance of Spain and France, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And because of the ultimate betrayal, France actually did the opposite and allied with England. And that was because ultimately it was exposed that the Cardinal was the one, not Philippe. And that's what made the betrayal even harder. You spineless little king couldn't stand up to your Cardinal?
And Cardinal Alberoni has global dominations. He's incredibly ambitious.
And truth be told, Regent Philippe had no intention on getting involved with Spain's little acquiescence of the Papal Italy states.
Right. Spain had lost in the Treaty of Ulrich several of the Papal states, and now they want them back.
Of course.
So that war was essentially a sequence of the War of Spanish Succession. Really, it is a continuation. This whole story is a continuation story that runs right up into today.
Right.
But reversed. Spain refused to accept that the map that was drawn out by the Treaty of Ulrich of 1713, which was meant to balance European power. So this is one of the times when we're like, okay, these are your borders. You guys can all go here, and no further, and we're all going to agree upon this.
Yep.
Okay. And now Spain is chafing under that. It doesn't want that.
Right.
Well, Cardinal Alberoni does not like this at all. Spain was forced to surrender its European territories outside of the Iberian Peninsula.
So which is modern-day Spain and Portugal.
Right. So they're using geography here, largely.
Mm-hmm. Keep your boundary, bro.
Now, and they're given the entire Iberian Peninsula because they're trying to check French dominance, too. Remember, France is actually massive. And they were a powerhouse in Europe. They were seen as a powerhouse in Europe, anyway.
They were absolutely a powerhouse at the time.
Austria received the Spanish Netherlands, Milan, Naples, and Sardinia.
Yeah.
The Duke of Savoy gained Sicily, along with the title of king. And he eventually traded that to Austria for Sardinia.
Becoming King of Sardinia as well.
So, King of Sardinia and Savoy. The Bourbons of France and Spain were never to merge their crowns or unite their territories. That's actually in the treaty. I think we did cover that already.
We did cover the treaty. This is kind of just a recap of what the treaty stated.
There had been this moment where Louis XIV, to be clear,
yep,
chooses badly and tries to sort of mass unite Spain and France. And kind of everybody's like, hold on, that is too much.
Yeah. So
I'm amazed they got away with it, actually.
Dude. That's part of why Louis V is on, not Louis V, Philip V is on the throne.
Right.
Like, that was the idea of merging. But then all of a sudden, they're like, wait, we are two power cannot join. We have to break up our country. So, now the real question here is, why did King Philip V actually permit the Cardinal Alberoni to be whispering in his ear to commit this act of treason against their brother country, France? So, Philip, he was a melancholy man. Like I said, like I called him a few minutes ago, he was spineless. He was ruled by whoever was in control of his bedchamber, which that means his queen and his cardinal. And his queen, Elizabeth Farnese, was Farnese, thank you. She was handpicked by the cardinal herself because of her bloodline. Her father was a prince of Parma, and that bloodline linked her to the papal states of Italy, of Piacenza and Tuscany, which would later be the reason, like, the cardinal's excuse to reclaim his family territories under her name. Because his family is from Pescana, Piacenza. I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't speak Italian. And Tuscany.
Piacenza and Tuscany.
So Alberoni and Elizabeth end up forming really formidable friendships. They become buddy-buddy because they're from the same Italian region.
Oh, and they're also ambitious, scheming connivers.
Who
know how to take advantage of a weak king.
Oh, and she was the only daughter, so she knew how important her worth was.
Right.
She was the only heir to those territories as well. She had no brothers.
Powerful woman.
Oh, she was a very powerful woman, and she knew it.
And he's a cardinal, so he's also got very the powerful cloak of the church.
Uh-huh.
Very important.
Oh, yeah. He manipulates the church, and Pope Innocent ends up hating him. Anyways. So Alberoni and Elizabeth form their friendship where they end up isolating and gatekeeping the king from his ministers. So ultimately, if any minister needed his majesty's signature, they had to either go through the queen or through the cardinal to get it. And at some point, they had even ended up convincing the king that reclaiming the lost Italian duchies was a holy crusade and would ensure his sons the proper claim the proper claim and glory they needed to be the heirs of Spain and Italy.
It's really important to understand that many of the nations of that time are essentially on a crusade of empire building. They're all trying to build empires for their sons. You have more than one son, and what you got to do is expand the kingdom. Otherwise, you're going to get
And truthfully, the queen had several sons with Philip. I left this out of my notes, but this is actually kind of important. She had several sons by the king. And these children, she knew one of them was going to become king of France. Not king of France. King of Spain. But the other children also needed their own land, their own territories.
Right.
And how was she going to ensure that? She wanted her family land back.
Right.
And she, like we said, she was an ambitious woman who knew her wealth. She ensured that her sons were going to get the land back. So he ended up agreeing to war, and that's what set Cardinal Alberoni into the decrees to Prince Silamir, let's get the Duke of Maine on the throne. And it also he started orchestrating the invasions of Sicily and Sardinia, which, that's where I got ahead a little bit about Pope Innocent. It wasn't Pope Innocent, I'm sorry, Pope Clement, the 13th, something like that. Pope Clement had actually sent Cardinal Alberoni money to go invade the Ottoman Empire, to go help the Habsburgs. And instead, he issued the Selamir Conspiracy and the invasion of Sicily and Sardinia.
Right.
So he lied to the Pope about where he was allocating the funds for war because the Pope wanted to go help the Habsburgs.
And he wanted to retake the Papal States for France.
Spain, for his glory.
Right, for Spain, excuse me.
Yeah.
Okay, so the linchpin, when a country goes to war, they very often have to manufacture a reason to get support.
Of course.
And this is the story of how Spain manufactured that reason. So, the linchpin for Spain was the unjust arrest, and it was unjust, of their new Grand Inquisitor of Spain, José Molinas, an elderly Spaniard clergyman living in Rome representing Spain. José Molinas was summoned home for promotion. As he had secured a papal passport intended to protect him from the charges that led to his arrest. However, Austrian authorities completely ignored his papal passport.
Yep.
And they had simply arrested him anyway in May of 1717. Now, there's already high tensions at this point between Madrid and Vienna. Neither side acknowledged the other's boundaries or claims to the Italian region, and it was humiliating for Spain that Austria would then flex on them like that by arresting their own Grand Inquisitor. Archduke Charles had ordered Molina's arrest because he orchestrated Molinas had orchestrated an intelligence network that worked against the Habsburg Empire while living inside the Austrian territory. So he's arrested basically as a spy. At this point, though, King Philip, and this is King Philip of Spain, and his power-hungry cardinal were looking for any reason to go to war anyway. And so the arrest is an outrage, and they turn it into, the narrative, sort of ultra-manufactured outrage that they needed, and that's to support the naval invasion of Sardinia in June of 1717, which was followed by an invasion of Sicily in July. The aggressive retaliation pretty much shocked all of Europe and ignited war again across the continent. Interesting, sadly, Molinas does not actually make it home. He dies in captivity in Austria.
So, for centuries, Sardinia and Sicily had always been under Spanish control, and only until recently, 1713 recently, they were under the Holy Roman Empire's control.
Right.
And so when Spain ended up invading Sardinia and Sicily in retaliation for Jose Molina's arrest, they retaliated with, "Long live the Catholic King! Welcome home, Spanish brothers!"
Right.
There was
for an invasion, they were met with cheers in the streets, so...
Yeah, they were welcomed home
and that
liberators.
Title, I'm not going to take it from you, but that title, Catholic King, is so meaningful.
Yeah, so by cheering "Long live the Catholic King" and welcoming in their Spanish invaders as heroes again, liberators, it was a sign of respect. It was denouncing the King of Savoy. He was a King of Sardinia. It was renouncing his title. It was announcing...
As he was an Austrian.
Yeah. He was French, technically. Savoy was French territory.
Oh, Savoy was French. Right.
And then when that region was also sold to Austria, they were still renouncing both of them. Right. And they were saying, "We want you home. Welcome back. Thank you for liberating us."
So they'd rather be under Spanish rule.
Yeah. And so, trying to stay true to French history, we're going to have to end up cutting so many battles and talking points out of this war. I would love to discuss the Battle of Cape Passero, which would show off Great Britain's excellent navy skills. Britain took out the entire Spanish Armada in one night. It was a glorious naval battle. And then the Battle of Glenshiel, where today stands a mountain, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna butcher the Celtic on this, Segura non Spontek, which means the Peak of Spaniards. Mortars were launched and set ablaze the fields of heather that disoriented the Spanish army and just led to sheer chaos, where Spain was supporting the Jacobite uprising in England and Scotland with the desire to replace King George I with James Stewart. And as much as I would love to share all of that extensive rabbit hole of the, Spanish chaos that was going on in the war, we're all going to have to cut that short because, well, we have so much more to talk about. But at the same time, this is also the end of the episode.
Well, the end of where we cut the episode. There is so much more to tell.
More to talk about.
And it is unfortunate because we will be skipping some of this in this narration as we are, in fact, moving forward towards the French Revolution.
Yep.
However, we'll be going back at various points. We're going to have to cover England. We cannot wait to cover the Papal States. Very much looking forward to covering the history of Spain. These are the conditions that made the world the way it is today in some very significant ways.
We still have to come back and finish the story of John Juan, the Mississippi Bubble.
Right. This is also the story of the American colonies.
The beginning, at least, of the French territory of Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
So
there's so much happening in the world at this moment, and it's incredibly cool journey.
When we come back in the next episode, we will tell you about the French deciding to enter the war in 1719, already raging for about a year and a half. So it took France about a year and a half. It's
a distraction from their little economic...
and it is absolutely a distraction from the chaos that's going on. Yeah. So when we return, we will be talking about that. Until then, bye!
Live long and prosper.